It's good to officially have you on. We were laughing just before I hit record because obviously, like for people who listen to this podcast regularly, they're going to know the story of how we met up in Point Lonsdale. I see your mum and dad strutting along the bike path each day, so I'd recognise their faces, and then I just saw from a distance you. It must have been 6 months ago now. I remember it was the last day of December. Um, Finishing your workout, had the kit on, moving nicely. I thought, oh, man, she looks like she knows how to run. And we started having a little bit of a chat. And then I realized, oh my gosh, so you're actually, for someone who is relatively new in some senses to the sport of running, like you haven't been in it your whole life, you've picked it up really quick. And we went for like what turned out, I don't know how well you remember it, but it was a welcome back to, to running for me. So I remember it well. We went you ran 27K, I ran 18 of it with you.
Right.
And we were looking at each other like 8K in going, man, we're moving pretty
We
quick.
were moving quick. I think it's because we were talking. And sometimes when you talk, you just kind of get into the groove.
Oh, I must have been asking the questions because I looked back at our paces and I was like, I think there's little chance that I was managing to hold a conversation at that pace, but we seem to do all right. And then we're due for another run. I'm sure you've probably heard in that podcast that you got tagged in where I just absolutely destroyed your last name that I've had since then. I'm so glad I started my marathon build up when I did, because apparently my body's like, no, we're going to really take our time getting ready for this marathon and just keep throwing calf strains at you. I say this with caution. I think I'm on top of it. Close, maybe. So we're due for another run. But then the second encounter we had on that path was you were doing your long run, I was doing mine, and we attempted a high five. And I think for everyone listening, I reckon I got like the very tip of your finger and just ran home going, man, like I got to work on my. That was one of the most embarrassing moments.
That was pretty funny. I forgot about
and
that.
I couldn't
like touched one finger, maybe.
Yeah, it was very lame, and I take full responsibility for it. But man, that was when you were just getting all set. Like I was enjoying following you on Strava and just seeing what you're up to, because I found out that day that you were getting ready for your 24-hour race, which is what Dion and I spoke about. And based on your training, it looked as though things were going to go well. And then I heard the result from Dion, and I was like, oh my gosh, like things just appeared to have come together really nicely.
Things kind of did come together really nicely. It was a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect to win it by any stretch. And I think what it came down to, I don't know if you remember, there was a day, the middle weekend of April, it rained pretty much, or certainly in Melbourne, for about 22 of the 24 hours. It started to drizzle and it was blowing a gale when we were just setting up our tarp and stuff beforehand. And it continued kind of drizzling until maybe about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it was like, okay, got to put a raincoat on. And it was torrential rain pretty much all night. There was a little window where I remember seeing like, oh, I can see a plane flying over. So it's like the sky is quite clear. But it was really miserable. And I feel like I just won a competition of who's the most stubborn woman, really.
So that was the day you ran it?
Yeah. The track flooded.
Oh my.
The track at one end of the track was just under a couple of inches of water. Like there was no way your feet were staying dry. There was no way anything was staying dry despite raincoats and things.
So what time did the race start again?
The race starts at midday and then you run through to midday the next day.
And you started in rain, you finished in rain, you had and you were saying it was overnight, there was a couple of hours of relatively clear.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It was pretty miserable.
See, the idea, I find it hard to comprehend. To be honest, I still find it hard to comprehend a 25K run. So the idea of a 24-hour run is just, it's so intimidating. And I think this is one thing we spoke about, like the fact that it starts at midday and then you run for 12 hours and you still have 12 hours to go. It's the middle of the night. Like, walk us through the process. Like, here's what I'm so interested in, because when it comes to the ultra stuff, I'm so out of my depth. I'm so fascinated by it. Anything above the marathon, I go, okay, we're in new territory here. And the reason I say that is because when it comes to pacing and fueling and rest and recovery and I'm not sure what else goes into a 24-hour race. So that's why I was so keen to get you on here, just to pick you. Walk us through it, because that's It's a long time to run.
It's a long time to run, and certainly by the end, I wasn't running. I was shuffling and walking for a lot of it. It is a lot to get right, and it's a lot of time for things to go wrong, which is what I learned. And prior to that run, the longest run I'd ever done was 100 Ks. So there's a really big difference between a 100K run that takes 12 hours, or it took me about 12 hours, and a 24-hour run. It's not just twice as long. Um, it, I made a lot of mistakes. Certainly in like the pacing, the nutrition, pretty much wherever I could make a mistake, really. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can kind of take you through from the start. The start's really clear in my memory. I had a plan because I'd never done anything more than 100 Ks. I kind of had a plan to run 100 Ks feeling comfortable and then just hold on for dear life, which might have been not the smartest way to tackle it, but I didn't really know how else to do it. And so that was kind of my plan. I started running, had a really detailed fuel and nutrition plan that was kind of broken down into half-hour blocks where I was going to, with everything that I was going to eat and drink, and and my rest times and everything in there, and that included fluid like water and electrolytes and gels, as well as some real food as well in there. I didn't get that all completely right. I was really conscious of needing to try to, and the dangers of particularly becoming hyponatremic, and so I was really aware of needing to get electrolytes in, but I didn't do the best job there. So the first 100 Ks went really well. I was really happy. I was excited to finally made it to the day. Followed the nutrition plan pretty well, but probably in hindsight relied too heavily on gels in that early part of the race. And then I think probably due to that, about 10 hours in, I started to get some stomach issues, started to need to pop into the toilet every couple of laps. And then it kept on trying to eat and drink. My crew were great, kept trying to feed me and get me drinking. And then I started vomiting as well, and things kind of fell apart. Yeah. And then the rest of the night is kind of a blur, really. I remember like having to have a few little lie downs in the tent and just being really cold because despite raincoats and things like that, everything was just soaked. And kind of knowing that I had to get up and keep going again, but no part of me wanted to.
That is wild. So 10 hours in, that's when you started to have your first really big troubles.
Yeah. And I'd say they continued between maybe like probably were at their worst between maybe 11 and 4 a.m., where I just really struggled to keep anything down. And at that point, someone in my crew was like, I think you need to get some more salt in. And from somewhere, he found this instant miso soup and got me to drink that. And that kind of seemed to turn things around a little bit. Someone made me like a really sugary tea in there at some stage as well.
So are you saying like every 2 laps after that for how long? Like how long were you how many hours were you having to run to the loo and get food and drink and rest and things like that? Because psychologically, that's the part of that freaks me out. Just thinking, all right, I've been running for 10 hours. I'm not even halfway. I've got 14 to go.
Yeah.
It's just starting to get, well, I mean, it's been dark at that stage for a few hours, especially here in Victoria. It's a combination of that nighttime kicking in and just starting to feel like you're out there by yourself, but also the fatigue. That was what I was most interested to hear about with this race, because I've met enough distance runners to know that they're crazy enough to push themselves to a certain point. But my experience has been like that certain point is another few Ks.
Yeah, well, that's been my experience in the past as well. Having never done any, like I was already kind of further than I'd ever run, and obviously there was some pretty dark moments in there where I remember running around in the rain, and you kind of in your own little, you've got your hood on, so you can't really see very much, and just kept on going round and round and round, thinking like, oh, this, maybe I was a bit silly to think that this was a possibility. You know, maybe I don't want to do it. And I reckon the only thing that kept me going was I've told so many people I'm doing this 24-hour run. I don't want to withdraw, and I never want to do it again, ever. So let's just keep going and get it done. Of course, that's all kind of changed now, but
Oh, you've got the bug back?
not so much the bug, but I learned so much. Like, I made a lot of mistakes. I had no idea. I was completely naive, and now I think, well, it'd be cool to do it again and try and get some of that stuff right.
So, what were I know you touched on pretty much everything, just not going 100% according to plan, but going into it, what did your plan look like in terms of fueling, electrolytes, food? There's so much that goes into just trying to stay hydrated and fueled for a run like that I can't even. One of the things I'm having trouble with, or not trouble, but I'm so new to the world of fueling and hydration. Like I just never really needed that or looked too far into it when I was a middle distance
Yeah.
runner back in the day. I probably could have got some benefit of it from it. But getting ready for the marathon now, obviously, it's such a big part of that I've become really interested in the topic and have learnt so much about it. But what you've done is sort of like a world ahead. I can't even imagine the planning and stuff that goes into that. So yeah, like at the start line, what did your plan look like
Oh, my
roughly?
plan was broken up into half-hour blocks, and it was like 1 half hour I'd have a gel and water. The next half hour I might have like some roast potatoes and an electrolyte drink. And I just had these little pop top bottles that I got my crew to fill up with drinks. And then it would be a gel, and then it would, like, the next half hour would be a gel and water, and then the next half hour would be electrolytes and some other kind of proper food. So I had a combination of like roast potatoes, little pikelets, um, some watermelon, some salt and vinegar chips. Yeah, and so I had a few little things that I'd tried in training runs that I thought would be just good, dense sources of carbs that probably wouldn't upset my stomach too much. But realistically, I relied, and having done only marathons and it's kind of shorter distance ultras where you can get most of your carbs from gels, and I'd worked out the types that worked best for me. But I think ultimately there was just too much of, I relied too heavily on gels to give me energy, and I think that probably the amount of fructose that I took in was too much, and that's what started my troubles.
Heaps of fun, heaps of fun. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
the opposite of
It's
fun.
Oh man, don't worry. I've had plenty of those experiences as well. Just the brutal reality of distance running. You always, that's what got wheat bix taken off my food and fuel before my long runs. It's just too dangerous. How did you like when you came to the planning element of it? How did you come up with a plan around how you'd balance the gels with actual real solid food? Like, did you have any idea of why it was that you like, apart from the carb factor
It was,
and maybe the comfort factor? How did you come up with
well,
that?
I just sort of, I mean, I don't know if I should even say this because it doesn't reflect that well upon me, but I did a nutrition degree. And so I was kind of aware, I'd worked out how many grams of carbs I thought I needed. And I used the same kind of, like, again, as I said before, I relied too heavily on gels because that's what's worked for me in the past. And I knew that I'd probably get sick of having gels and that I'd need to have some actual food in there as well. But what I didn't account for was just how much, probably more energy I'd need, because it kept going on and on and on. So it wasn't just a simple um, matter of like the same formula I could use for a 60K or 100K. It needed to be, I needed to rely on getting more carbs in, and I needed more actual food early. And when I looked at the people who'd done it a few times, like there was, people there that had done it several times before. And I remember seeing one guy with like a takeaway container with pasta and pesto, just like walking a lap and eating that, and just thinking, wow, you're crazy. But actually, like, he was the smart one at the end of the day.
Were you uh Were you starting to question your training and anything like when you got to 10 hours in, or at that point? Because it's a really strange event to train for. Like, I'm not sure what your longest run was in the lead up to it, or how you structured it around training and around sleep and family and everything else you've got going on. But it'd be an area that I can imagine when you've got so much time to think that you'd start to realize, oh, okay, I didn't really take this into consideration. Like, and we could get into that more in more detail soon, like, because I'd love to be able to pick your brain and explain to people how it was you trained for that. But just from sort of a psychology perspective, was that something that you had to navigate through during the run as well?
Not so much my training. I don't feel like I could have done any more training. I did question my sanity. And I also, I don't know if you remember, I was given the entry as a 40th birthday present. So I also questioned whether or not my friends really loved me a little bit in there. But you know, they definitely they were there also suffering on the sidelines, so that was nice. Um, I didn't really trust. I didn't think too much about the training, to be honest. I don't really remember what I was thinking about. I know I spent an awful lot of time trying to count how many laps it was each half hour, and I still couldn't tell you. Like, I just kept counting and then going, oh, I've forgotten what I'm up to, so I have to start again, because I was breaking it down. Initially, I was just running all the time, and then probably at about 70 k's, I started to put in a walk lap every half hour, and then after 100 k's, I think I dropped that back to a walk lap every 15 minutes, and kind of kept going like that for most of the night. Once I got up again, I had a rest at about 4 a.m., got up again, and my ankles and shins were really swollen and really sore. And at that point, I kind of realized I didn't think I was going to get much more running in, but managed to hobble a few laps in there.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of pace were you holding for that first 70K?
The first 70 Ks was probably 5 30-minute Ks. I did the first 100 Ks in 9 hours 30, which I was really happy with. But
That's
it
unbelievable.
just felt like, it sounds ridiculous because it all kind of fell apart enormously after that. But it felt so comfortable at the time. And that's one thing I don't think I would change. I think that there was really no way. I was so nervous and so excited about starting the event. I always go out too fast, and I was really like conscious of trying to hold back, but that felt slow and easy. And I think that if I had started slower, the the end result wouldn't have been that different. I still would have fallen in a heap at some stage. Um, I still wouldn't have been getting in the calories that I needed. I still probably would
Mm.
have run into tummy trouble, and I still would have just got really tired and realized it's a really long time to be on your feet.
Did
Um,
you have music or anything in your ears?
nah, no, I had my phone with me with a few audiobooks loaded up and playlists and stuff. And then it was so wet
Yeah.
the thought of like trying to figure out how to get my phone in a plastic bag, get headphone, like take everything off to get headphones in, put it all back together. I spent a lot of laps thinking like, oh, next time I reckon I'll get that next time I stop I'll get that sorted out, and I just didn't.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's such a long time. I go for an hour run, and if I don't have music, sometimes I go, this is a long, lonely run." Unless I've got someone like yourself there to talk to. How did you structure your training? Like, I know this is probably something that changes a lot as you get closer to it and when you're trying to prime for it, but like the standard training week, especially here in Australia, is pretty much like Sunday's your long run. For a lot of people, Tuesday, Thursday, some people Saturdays are your sessions, and you'll do some easy-ish runs in and around that. And like people don't really stray too far from a structure like that, apart from they might swap a session for an easier run or something, just depending on fitness and age and whatever else they've got going on. Did you use a similar structure to
yeah,
that? Like, how did you come up with an idea of, all right, this is how far I need to run on at a certain point. This is the time I need to do it. Because one thing that really stood out to me, and I think I said this in the podcast with Dion, was you made an interesting point saying that working as a nurse and doing shift work so long is like you feel a really big advantage to you. And I was like, of course that would work, because like the idea of just fatigue, like the fatigue in the sense that, okay, I need to go to sleep, that starts to play tricks on a lot of people's minds as well. And they probably don't quite realize how able they are to be able to push through that level of fatigue.
Definitely.
Definitely not promoting the idea in terms of
Yeah.
health and well-being, but in terms of getting ready for a race, it's
No, without a doubt. That I never was that anxious about that. I mean, I know like one thing that doing shift work and having kids as well, like you would know this, has taught me that
Mhm.
like, you know, you can survive being really tired. It's just one day. I'm not going to get any sleep. That's okay. It's nothing to panic about. I know what it feels like to feel pretty crappy when you've been awake for too long. You know, I can start to feel a bit dizzy and a bit kind of get some nausea and stuff just from being awake for too long. But that never really worried me. I know what it's like to be awake at 3 a.m. when your body's just wanting to be asleep, and I know how to kind of push through that feeling. I, I've done that at work, and I mean, it wasn't exactly the same as being at work, but yeah, that didn't really worry me at all. I spoke to a lot of people about what I should do with training. Like, should I be getting up in the middle of the night to go for a run? Should I not? And I think I spoke to my coach as well, who he set the plan, and I just trusted completely that what he was doing was right. Um, and and we kind of agreed that getting up in the middle of the night probably wasn't the best thing to do. But what I did do was my week, like you said, that structure of a long run on a Sunday, a couple of easy runs, a couple of sessions didn't really change that much. And I was surprised that my overall weekly mileage didn't change that much either. But what we did was dropped my week's normally like an easy run on a Monday, a session on a Tuesday, a medium long run on a Wednesday, rest day Thursday, easy day Friday, session Saturday, and long run Sunday. So I kind of dropped my sessions back to one speed workout a week, and then incorporated a back-to-back long run. And sometimes that was an evening, like he'd set like an evening long run, and then I'd get up in the morning and do the second long run. So I think the longest was like a marathon that I started at 7:30 in the evening or something, and then got up the next morning, and I had maybe it was like 2 hours or something the next morning. Um, and then just coincidentally, the longest run of the training block was a 5-hour run. That because I've got 3 kids as well, and just happened to be this particular weekend where my husband was away, and so my kids are not babies, so they're okay to leave at home. But I got up at 3:30 in the morning to leave home at 4 to get that done, so that by the time I got home, I could take them to their sport and
oh,
birthday parties and stuff. So I just needed to make sure I was home early.
that's when I know you said they're not little babies anymore, but that's when the real challenge starts. I notice that now. So my kids are one of them, Charlie. He's not really a baby. He's almost 3, but I got a 9-month-old, and I know that whenever I go out for a really hard session and I come home, like say if I start my run at 7:30, get home at 9 or a bit after 9, and I've pushed it a little bit, I go, oh my goodness, like this is where the challenge starts because we've got all day. I've got to try and entertain these kids. Obviously, my wife is a legend and carries a heap of the weight, but at the same time, trying to navigate that and feel as though you're contributing is
Absolutely. And
is
all
a
you want to do is
challenge.
lie on the couch and eat. Like,
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I actually I bumped into Pat, your mum, down at Pico, the little cafe here in Point Lonsdale, and it must have been the day after you ran your marathon because I said, "Oh, how's Sarah going?" She's like, "Oh yeah, she ran a marathon last night," and I was like, "Of course she did. That's exactly what she has to do in order to get ready for it." And it's Chris, isn't it?
yeah,
Your dad.
yeah.
And Chris is just looking at me going, mate, like I don't get it.
I
Like I don't
know.
understand
They
what it
were
is she's
so
thinking. But
cute. We were down at Point Lonsdale with them the weekend before the race, and like they were just I'm right like typing up my spreadsheet and stuff, and like a real nerd, like what I'm gonna eat, when I'm gonna rest, everything, and trying to like put together how far I thought I could run, and my dad was like, "Do you really think you're going to be able to run 160 kilometers? You know, that's 100 miles." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of hoping I can run a bit further than that, you know." Anyway, they were like, "We're not coming. We refuse to come. I don't want to see you do that to yourself." Anyway, like, sure enough, I think it was probably about 11 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday. They were there.
That's awesome.
Great
Yeah, you
system.
guys operate at a different pace. Actually, from my window downstairs, I see them every morning, and they operate at a more leisurely pace than what you were setting out to do. So yeah, the idea of running too fast seems like a concept that they wouldn't be a huge fan of. But man, when your mum was telling me about what you're doing, she was saying it with like a little bit of swagger in her voice. I was like, well, so you should have that because it is really impressive. But I actually haven't caught up with them, I don't think, since that run. But so what they saw
Yeah, they
the
came
last
down
hour or the
like
last they were there before the start?
they came down for the last hour, which was, or
Yep.
maybe it was a bit longer. I can't remember. But they were great. So they'd been watching it. You could watch it live, and because I took off so eagerly, I think for the first 10 hours or something, I was coming third overall, and so my mum said she went to bed, and then got up and I think she said to me, I was listening to the rain and I just thought you would have stopped. And I got up in the morning and you weren't coming third overall, but you were still leading the women. And I said to Dad, like, get up, we're going to Melbourne, get up, we're going. So that was really, really nice that they made it down. I was like, oh,
So how far that's an awesome effort. How far did you get in the end, did you say?
183.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you absolutely smashed what you were hoping to. Well, what did you say? What were you aiming to get? You said you wanted more than
Actually, I did.
160.
I wanted, in reality, and probably really stupidly, I was sort of hoping to get between 190 and 200.
Hmm.
I don't know why I thought I could do that. I still think I can at some stage, but probably not the first time. And yeah, my B goal was like 175, 180, and my C goal was over 160. So yeah, I guess sort of came in somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. I guess the beauty with the 24-hour run as well is there's so much room for improvement. And it sounds like even just hearing about a couple of issues that you had to navigate, and I'm sure even the best day of any 100K race, there's going to be some serious challenge thrown your way.
Yeah, with any
But
race there is, and I think the further it is, the more likely stuff can go wrong. Even with a marathon, like you know, you can prepare. You can prepare for what you think is every eventuality, and then on the day something comes from left field, and like maybe your little toe on your left foot that you've never had an issue with for some reason really starts hurting halfway through the marathon, or like there'll always be something. You hardly ever speak to anyone after anything marathon distance or longer that says everything went exactly to plan the whole day.
yeah. So where are you at in your training right now? So it was April that you did the race. So what's like a month and
Yeah,
a little bit ago?
yeah, it was about 6 weeks ago. So right now in the training, I just had a big break. I was signed up to do the ultra down at the Great Ocean Road last weekend. And about 3 weeks after Coburg, I was just like, there's absolutely no way. I'm not feeling good at all. I just had like this overwhelming fatigue. And so it was a tough decision to withdraw, but I just thought to myself, like, it can only go two ways. Either it's going to be a really miserable, long run, or my ego gets the better of me and I try and race it and I like cause myself some damage. So I made the decision to pull the pin and then went down there, had a lot of friends doing different distances and stuff. And I just raced in the 14K, cheered everyone on Sunday, and then came away from that like, okay, I want to race again now.
Yep, that's good. So do you feel as though your body's fully
Yeah,
recovered now?
I feel really good. I saw a naturopath dietitian who's put me on some supplements, and I think that's made a big difference. And also just like letting myself have that. I was also really naive thinking that it was like any other race where you could kind of take a few weeks off and then get back into training. It wasn't. And I did really need a lot of extra rest.
Did you notice for the first, like a couple of weeks after that, were you sleeping more, or are you just generally more
I
fatigued,
needed
or?
more sleep, but I wasn't sleeping more. It happened like the middle weekend of the school holidays, so I went to bed pretty early on that Sunday night, and then the next day it was like, right, like, okay, we've got no food in the house, so off to the supermarket. Just a normal
How
day.
good, yeah, good old mum life. Yeah, good old.
Yeah.
That's intense. Now, because how old's your youngest?
He's 9.
Okay, okay. I don't want to say it's getting easier
Oh,
because I
it's
don't
getting
know. I've heard
easier,
some
but he's
story.
still
Yeah, I get nervous to say anything when I'm not in that territory now. I go, mate. Like, does your kid still poo his pants and don't sleep through the night? Like, I win that battle.
my kids don't, like, they mostly sleep through the night. They don't
Yeah.
poo their pants anymore.
Yeah, that's such a relief.
Yeah.
So in terms of quantity, like during the week, I know you said that the actual distances that you were running wasn't that much more than what you would usually do. But what is that? Like, what are you trying to hit each week?
About 130-ish. I think, like, my peak weeks there were between 130 and 140 weeks. I think just like there was one week where I had a couple of, I went to Mount Buffalo and did a couple of races at Buffalo Stampede. So we, with a group of 4, we did the 100K as a relay, and my leg was about 30Ks. And then the next day I did the marathon there as well, and got lost. So a couple of extra Ks. I think that ended up being 47 or something. So that was obviously a big weekend. And I'd had another long run in that same week. I think that was my biggest week. I would have hit 150 Ks in that 7 days, which was great. Was good to, I felt confident. You asked about, was I doubting my training? And I wasn't really. I felt really confident that, and I was surprised as well that even after a weekend like that, then on the Monday I could get up and still go for an easy run and feel pretty okay. Like, my body held up surprisingly well. I did do more Pilates and strength work in that, like, sort of from early this year, which than I have done previously, and that's certainly made a difference.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask you about your sort of other styles of training. So you're incorporating what were you doing a couple of sessions a
A
week,
couple of
or how
sessions
did?
of Pilates, and then I don't know. There's a American runner, Sally McRae,
Mhm.
who, the yellow runner, and she's got an app. She does this Bulletproof Runner app, and it's just like really short, or some of it's long workouts, but she's got on her app like a few just short workouts as well. So I'm lucky I've got a little home gym set up, and would even just come up and do 20 minutes of stuff up here.
Yeah, are you in your gym now? I can see
I
some
am.
form of rings
Yeah.
behind you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's good. I thought it was just your curtains before for
Nah.
people just listening, but I got a glimpse between that sunlight shining through, and I was like, oh no, she's in a gym of some
Well,
sort.
yeah, it's like study on this side, gym on that side.
Smart move. No, that's such a smart move. So, like, how many days a week are you doing extra strength work?
Probably I would do something 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah, and is that predominantly core, or are you working on legs, a
Heaps
little
of
bit of
core,
everything?
predominantly core and legs, not so much upper body. But I did start going to a shoulders and core class at a gym. When did I start? Probably early this year as well. Started going into that class, which is great as well. It's just like some different stuff that I don't do myself.
Oh, so good. Do you know Alice Bakey?
Yeah, yeah, she's who I do Pilates with.
Oh man, she's such a
Yeah,
gun.
she
Like, she's
is.
been on here a couple of times as well,
Has she?
and
Oh, that's so funny.
yeah, yeah, I love her. I love her. Like, just her general energy is amazing. But then you speak to her about what she's actually doing, and I've done a number of her classes on like, when I'll get back from an easy run some days, and I'll just chuck on some AB Pilates, and I'll never forget during
Yeah,
lockdown she
hard.
was running these classes, and I'd been doing quite a lot in the gym, so I thought I was a big tough guy, and I went onto this class, and I reckon there was about 18 girls on there, and then there was me, and I was like, oh, I'll show them how it's done. About 2 minutes in, I was like, I'm getting shown how it's done, because I could not believe. I was so disappointed I chose to have the camera on me, because I'd come in thinking I was a real big deal. But she's a little machine.
I
Like, she's a little
know.
pocket rocket. Just
Yeah.
some of the things that she does, and she's. I feel bad for her that she's speaking so casually through her videos,
I
because
know.
the pain that I'm going through, there's no conversations taking place.
Nah, I know. I'm amazed that, like, she can even just keep counting. I'm glad that the sound's off, because I'm usually like moaning and groaning and swearing at her in the background.
Oh, do you do her, like, her YouTube channel classes, or are you actually a part of
No, I
her
do her like
membership?
the online membership one. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like I was speaking to her. I think the first chat we had was when it was relatively new.
Yeah.
And I was on her website a while ago and just seeing the amount of classes that she has up there now.
Oh,
I
she's
mean,
doing
I,
so
I actually I'll
well.
put it in the yeah, for anyone interested, I'll put a link to a membership in the description because it's something that I think so overlooked in the running department, just general and overall strength. It's something that with the athletes that I coach, I'm trying to encourage them if they haven't got some form of, even a 10 or 15-minute practice
Same
to
here.
develop that.
I think hers
Oh,
are so good now. You can do them on demand.
yeah.
A lot of them she records, and some of those Pilates for runners, they are so hard. Some of those
Yeah.
classes. Yeah.
Are you doing any like things like yoga or stretching
I
or
don't
like
do
what is the
no.
other?
She
No.
does a class as well. I don't know if you remember in lockdown, she started this wind down class. So it was like with another guy that did the classes. He used to write a cocktail recipe, and then you bring this cocktail to the 5 o'clock on a Friday wind down class and stretch and drink. And that was really fun. So that's a good. I don't always bring a cocktail anymore, but I try and fit in one of those stretch classes at least once a week when I can.
Yeah, I don't know what I did the other day. I traveled down because I don't know if I told you this. I do a lot of stand up
Yeah,
comedy,
yeah.
which means I'm always traveling down to Melbourne. And last week I was there 3 times, it's sort of like a 2 hour drive in the car each way. And I don't like even now I'm standing up because my lower back's so sore. But the other day I went into the gym just with some general fatigue in my lower back, and I was doing deadlifts, which I've been doing for 10 years and never had an issue with. And just the other day, I was on about rep 4, and I felt this mild little
Oh,
strain in my lower back, and I was like, I'll leave that there. And oh my gosh, I thought it was okay. The last people on this podcast, I mean, there's literally there's 10,000 people all around the world who are just so sick of me complaining about how sore my body is because every time I get on here, it's my calf and then it's my back. But at the
that's just
moment,
being
like
a runner.
oh my goodness, that's the nicest thing anyone said because my wife always tells me it's because I'm getting old. I go, hey, enough of that. But yeah, I've been trying to just get this body right. As I said, I'm so glad I started the preparation when I did because what is it? It's still like 19 weeks
Yeah,
till
you've got
Melbourne Marathon.
ages. Yeah.
Yeah, so I still feel quietly confident that I'll be able to get it together. But oh my goodness, it's just a comedy of errors at the moment, which is like you were laughing at your nutrition plan based on the fact you studied diet or nutrition. I'm like really cautious to say this because people go, well, why would I get this bloke to coach me? I don't understand. His body just doesn't quite function. But we'll see. A couple months time,
I think
hopefully.
it'll all come together for you. You've got heaps of
I'm
time.
it is a lot of time. See, I'm being a type A kind of runner, and you just want it's so true, isn't it? Like most runners are like this, that you
Yeah.
just want the dream build up to every race and the dream
Absolutely.
preparation, and then you'll get there the night before, and your kid screams all night, and you just do you know what I mean?
I
Like, you just
know.
manage to tie it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you so in terms of races and things like that? What have you got on for the next couple
So
of months? Are you eyeing off Melbourne
I
at
think
all?
so. I think so.
Yes.
I'm trying to decide, and also maybe there's time to do both. I think I'm gonna do Run Melbourne half in July, and then probably Melbourne Marathon, and then I'm kind of keen to do Gold Coast 50K, and that's
When's that?
that's the first weekend of December.
Oh, that'd be
So
great.
I
So
think
what's that?
there's like 7 weeks between Melbourne Marathon and the 50K, which I reckon is probably okay.
It's amazing how quick people recover from marathons now. I remember even when I was running competitively, I finished in 2013. I don't know when the first Vaporfly came out. Maybe it was 2012.
Yeah, when
Trying to
was
remember. I
it?
can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry for all the shoe nerds out there.
I
I
reckon
have
it was
no
a bit
idea.
later, maybe like
Yeah, you're
2000.
probably right. But I remember like the idea of running 4 marathons or 5 marathons in a year seemed like a lot, which it still is a lot. But even I've spoken to a number of athletes on here who just put their quick recovery time down to the shoes that they're running in. Because back in the day, they're just these
I reckon it
flats.
makes a difference. The first
Yeah.
marathon I did was and that was I've only been running for 10 years, not even 10 years, and the first marathon I did was in really uncomfortable flat racing shoes that were too small as well for me. I realise now, but gosh, my feet were so sore. My legs were so sore, and I just thought, oh yeah, that's what happens when you run a marathon.
Man, it's a brutal industry. I'm not going to hold you up here for too much longer. As we said, as long as you're still happy, we'll get you on the bite-sized bonus podcast. So I'm really keen to pick your brains about in a little more detail about what you would change specifically going into your next 100Ks. Like I know we've touched on a couple of those things, but to break those down. So
Yeah,
if you're up for a chat about that, would love to pick your brains on that, because man, it'd just be so interesting to hear like the real key changes that you would make.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome. Oh, that'd be good. Well, if you're already a member of the training hub, you're going to be able to find that over there now. If not, I'll whack a link in the description for anyone who's interested in that. But thanks so much for coming on the main podcast.
oh, thanks for having me.
That was fun. I'll leave it there. We'll see you later, everybody.